The recent history of mixed-race Britain starts in port towns like this one in South Shields. True, there were Africans in Britain since the time of the Romans. Asians settled on these shores in the 1600s, and of course there were freed slaves. But it's not really till the turn of the last century that mixed-race communities, small as they were, began to shape our collective history. Trade was the great magnetic force. A booming economy based on coal and ships sucked in workers from the empire. Our ports, London, Liverpool, Cardiff and others, resounded with foreign tongues. In South Shields there were Arab seamen from Aden, today's Yemen, recruited by the Merchant Navy. As residents of the British Empire and its protectorates, they were entitled to work here. They would spend months at sea stoking the fires of commerce around the world. When they came ashore, these men were put into lodgings run by the private shipping companies.
In 1909, some of the men lived here in the Leygate district in what were then boarding houses. It wasn't that they wanted to live separately, they didn't really have a choice. The seamen weren't actually allowed to stay with local families.
The reason? The age-old fear that this army of single men, thousands of miles away from their families, would look for company and more among the local women. This is one of the last boarding houses that remain in South Shields. Friends still meet to talk over the old days.
When we come in here, from High Shields, we was bridge, there, bridge.
A bridge from High Shields, yeah.
The all back and front, the all houses, Arab houses, and all cafe, boarding house. You feel, when you hear the record, Arab record, you feel you were in Yemen.
If they didn't have their own house or they weren't married, it was like a bed and breakfast, if you like. So they used to call them boarding houses or the Arab cafes, and people used to meet there as well. It wasn't just a bed and breakfast, it was like a little community cafe as well.
You have to remember though, they weren't allowed to go in English cafes when they came here. No.
When they first came.
They couldn't go into it there, they couldn't go into a tea shop. So they had to set their own place up where they could meet.
For years, these segregated groups of foreign workers were too small to have any great impact, but that would change. When Britain went to war in 1914, it needed sailors, lots of them, to work on its merchant ships. The Empire was the obvious labour pool. With German U-boats picking off our ships, threatening Britain's supply chain, these men played a vital part in the war effort.
They're growing in numbers. Some of them also come and work in factories, but they're arriving in ports like London, like Cardiff, like Liverpool. And they increase from a few hundred to a few thousand.
It became ever more difficult to prevent social mingling, and British women, who'd played their part in the war effort, no longer fitted the demure stereotype.
I think it transformed women's lives because they had to take on jobs that had been designated men's jobs.
You couldn't turn the clock back. Jobs are scarce. These war-weary men are bristling with resentment, and then they see their women with foreigners. It's enough to tip them over the edge. In 1919, rioting broke out in the port areas around Glasgow and spread to South Shields.
You've got to imagine hundreds of seamen here on the dockside at Milldam, the whites easily outnumbering the Arabs. Both sides had guns, bottles, knives and stones. Most of the firing was into the air. Nobody actually got shot, but both groups threw their missiles at each other. A local woman called Dora Sharp, who worked in one of the boarding houses, was a witness to the violence. In court, she spoke up for some of the Yemenis, saying she'd seen a white man pointing a gun at an Arab in the heat of the riot. Magnificently, she declared, "I wouldn't leave the Arab house for 20 of you. I'm probably going to marry one of them tomorrow." Happy days.
The riots spread to Cardiff, another port city that had changed. Before the war, there'd been about 700 foreign seamen in the city. By 1919, there were 3,000.
For local men returning from the war, it was a shock to discover Arabs taking their jobs. But that wasn't the worst of it. You can actually track the simmering discontent through the letters pages in the local papers. There's some real heartfelt grudges coming to the fore. Look at this. Furthermore, the Arabs can always be relied upon to pick the prettiest girls, the ugly ducklings being left for the white man. Also, an Arab can get a job where a white man has not a look in. They refuse to sell themselves so cheaply. But it was on the 2nd of August 1930 that it all kicked off, right here. Four policemen were stabbed and many more people, both white and Arab, were injured. Only 10 days later, 6 white men and 20 Yemeni sailors found themselves in court, charged with affray and causing a riot. 15 of the Yemeni men were sentenced to deportation after serving time in prison. The Mill Dam riots have been described as Britain's first race riot.
I think there was deep resentment, and they felt not simply that these men were taking their women, but they were taking their jobs, although in fact that wasn't true. Actually, after the war there was higher unemployment amongst black men and Chinese men than these white men. So sort of the definers of working class masculinity, which I think, linked to the ability to get a job, the ability to get a woman, that is really being challenged.
In direct response to the riots, the authorities resorted to some stringent legal measures. Laws designed to restrict German nationals during the war now covered all foreign seamen. It would limit their movement, subject them to curfew, control employment, and last for decades. In short, the foreigners were blamed. Despite the rules and regulations, mixed communities in port towns were still growing. The Yemeni enclave in South Shields, for example, was about 3,000 strong. Norman and Maureen Kader have been married for 37 years. They're both second-generation mixed-race Yemenis, though you'd be hard-pushed to tell in Maureen's case. Both have Yemeni grandfathers who came to South Shields. Maureen remembers how hard the Yemeni men tried to fit in.
I know when they came here they were very smart. When they changed clothes they had to be very, very smart. They wanted to try and be like the English people. They wanted to blend in. You always seen them in a trilby hat, lovely immaculate shoes, waistcoats. And it was all to help them to blend in so that they didn't stand out. And they were always very, very well mannered.
One of these men was Norman's grandfather, Mohammed Hassan. He married Elizabeth Taylor, a Geordie. Their love affair was all the more incredible given what was happening around them.
It would have been very difficult for them because if you were in a mixed marriage you were called some dreadful names. You were classed as a prostitute, and women were known to have been spat on in the street and verbally abused.
The white women?
Yes.
South Shields was by no means unique. Prejudice towards mixed-race families hundreds of miles away in Cardiff, some had already made their choice. Racial mingling, as some called it, was growing. By the mid-30s, Tiger Bay was home to about 3,000 foreign seamen, mainly Africans and Arabs. Many of them had been born and bred in Cardiff, but were still treated as foreigners. Nonetheless, they and their descendants would go on to create one of the country's most proudly mixed communities.
My dad had just opened up the Cairo Cafe, not long, and he happened to be standing outside on the front door in Bute Street. And my mother, she was a nurse at the time, she'd been to the cinema, and she was trying to get back to the Cardiff Royal Infirmary, where she lived. You know, the accommodation was there.
Olive Salaman was 15 years old when she moved from the small town of Penydraig in the Rhondda Valley to Cardiff to train as a nurse.
I stopped and asked this boy then the way to Queen Street, and he said I was losing my way to the docks. And we started talking. I think we fell in love there and then.
The boy she met and asked for directions was Ali Salaman, a young Yemeni working as a chef in his own cafe.
We got married when I was 16 and 3 weeks, actually. I had 5 children before I was 21. We had 10 children, 5 boys and 5 girls. Of course, when I got married, there was a great stir at home because the priest from the church even came and told my mother that marrying an Arab, I was marrying a heathen, and there was quite a stir at home.
I used to go in the Cairo Cafe, and in the back of the Cairo Cafe they had a little Arab school. And I used to go to the Arab school, and many of the kids used to go to the Arab school, even though we weren't Arabs or Muslims for that matter. But because your friends were going, you wanted to go along. But we were like a very integrated community.
What's that? Ta. 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 Ti kisra. Ta. At-sakin. Ya Allah.
Tiger Bay was home to many different races. They all came together, though, to celebrate festivals like Eid, the end of Ramadan.
You'd wake up and you might hear a sound. Hilalawiyah, hilalawiyah. And you go, oh, it's Arab Christmas. So you ran out there and you looked for your friends and all of the people of the Arab community, and they'd be in their native dress, and they'd parade in the street with flags and what have you, and we'd follow along in the parade. We'd be all part of it. Then when it came to the food, they would offer you the food, or you could run home and actually get a pot, and you'd get curry and rice, and you'd be able to take it home.
Britain's mixed-race families were sharing each other's customs and making their own rules. It was genuinely multicultural, though that's not what people called it then. It was like that for Norman Cader's mother, Margaret, in South Shields, who was married to a Yemeni seaman, Abdo.
My mother, she wasn't a full practicing Muslim, if you like. She still held a lot of the beliefs.
So would your mother have run the house as if it were a Muslim house, as far as, for example, eating pork and that kind of thing?
My father never ever ate pork. My mother, on the other hand, to a certain degree.
Why are you giggling? Why are you giggling away? There's a little secret going on here.
The English women would eat pork when the husbands were out.
When they were out at sea or something?
No, when they actually left the house.
Oh, really?
For me, it was different because my mum would eat what she wanted. So we had a separate frying pan, which she had to keep in a separate cupboard from my father. You know, you couldn't use that, and he knew that. And he would often swear in Arabic if he had seen the frying pan out, you know, because she'd been cooking bacon and that. But a lot, the same as what Norman's mum did.
But your mum was doing it in secret?
Yes.
These couples were making it up as they went along, sharing some customs and quietly ignoring those that didn't work for them. It was, if you like, a delightful free-for-all, and that just didn't suit some people. In Cardiff, one man, above all, wanted to put a stop to this sweet chaos.
The city's chief constable, one James Wilson, was becoming increasingly concerned about Tiger Bay's reputation for immorality and mixed-race marriages, and he reported his worries to his local police committee, saying that coloured men were coming into contact with the female sex of the white race. Their progeny, he said, were half-caste, with the vicious hereditary taint of their parents. Not one to pull his punches.
The picture the chief constable painted of the area was very different from the reality.
It had a bit of a reputation because there was a lot of street gambling used to go on, and being a port, there was prostitution and that. But the actual people from Butetown, they were the nicest people you could ever come across. When the Cairo Caf was in its heyday, we employed a lot of the women that lived down in the bay. They came to work in the Cairo Caf, and some of them would be babysitting us as we were youngsters and whatnot. My mother was also, believe it or not, chairman of the Conservative Club in the Docks, which caused great problems amongst the community.
طيبة